Today's lesson is who should make the call on typhoon holidays. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And now we're talking about typhoon holidays. Of course, this is typhoon season right now. So, of course, we have typhoons coming and going all the time. Some years we have more than others. But also, when we have those typhoons, they can be so severe that the government needs to decide whether to cancel school or cancel work for people's safety.
Absolutely. And of course, most people that you know, whether they're school students or your average office worker, is pretty happy when there's a typhoon holiday. I mean, most of us like to have an extra day off to sit around the house and catch up with our television viewing or our naps or whatever. But there are people, bosses of big companies, parents with kids in school who they have to arrange for childcare and things like that. And it can be kind of inconvenient. So it's a good question of who makes the call. Who decides whether it's going to be a typhoon holiday? You would think it might just be the scientists, meteorologists, weather people who are observing these things, but they don't necessarily have the power to make these decisions of shutting down whole cities or even whole countries. So who makes the call? When we talk about making the call, we're kind of saying making the decision, and especially important in this case, makes the final decision on this, because I'm sure there are a lot of different opinions and different perspectives, but someone ultimately has to make the call or the final decision on whether there will be a typhoon holiday or not, and that can have all sorts of different consequences. So let's find out about it and listen to different people's opinions on the question of typhoon holidays and how they are decided. Who should make the call on typhoon holidays? Taiwan experiences an average of 3.7 typhoons annually. And as each storm approaches, local governments scramble to decide whether to call a typhoon holiday. In recent years, some critics have argued that this system is abused by politicians hoping to curry favor with voters. However, many still believe allowing each region to make its own decision provides the best way to protect citizens. Below, 8 people offer their opinions on this divisive topic.
大家好，第一部分介绍名词 critic 表示批评者、评论家。例如 My uncle is a film critic for a major newspaper. 我叔叔是一间大报社的影评。或是 As a food critic, Jenny visits a variety of restaurants every single week. 作为一名美食评论家 Jenny 每周都会走访许多不同的餐厅并进行评论。后面看到动词 abuse, 它的意思是滥用、虐待。例如 It's unethical to abuse the trust that clients place in their financial advisors. 滥用客户对其财务顾问投入的信任是不道德的。或者 Christy promised not to abuse the power of her new role by favoring certain employees. Christy 承诺不会透过偏袒某些员工来滥用她新职位的权利。继续介绍形容词 divisive 表示有争议的，造成分裂的。可以说I suggest you avoid bringing up any divisive issues at the dinner. 我建议你晚餐时避免提起任何有争议的议题。又或者说 The politician's speech was divisive, sparking debates across social media. 该政客的演说引起分歧，在社群媒体上激起辩论。
Okay, the first part of our lesson for today introduces this topic to us. Again, we're wondering who should make the call, who should make the decision on typhoon holidays. You could also call it a typhoon day. I remember when growing up in the Midwest of the U.S., of course, if there was a big snowstorm, a blizzard or something, we would anxiously listen to the radio to find out if school was canceled so we could have a snow day, which means we can stay home and we don't have to go to school. We were always excited when they made the announcement that there's no school today and you can stay home. So a school day or a typhoon holiday, typhoon day, they all mean pretty much the same thing. And Taiwan experiences an average of 3.7 typhoons annually. And as each storm approaches, local governments scramble to decide whether to call a typhoon holiday. So if something happens annually, it happens every year. So on average, Taiwan gets 3.7 typhoons every year. You don't get 7/10 of one typhoon coming in. Of course, this is accumulated over years, and then they add the years together, and then they divide by the number, and that's how you get the average there. So yes, we get 3.7 typhoons on average every year.
All right, so kind of between 3 and 4 would be a typical year. And as it says, as each storm approaches, local governments scramble to decide whether to call a typhoon holiday. So this is not a rare event, as we know from having this average of 3.7 a year. But when each storm approaches, whenever there is a storm in those months when we expect typhoons, local governments scramble to decide whether to call a holiday. Local governments would be not just the national government, the president, and whatnot working in cabinet, but also county governments, city governments, and things like that. Well, they scramble to decide whether a holiday should be called or not. When you scramble to do something, it means you're kind of doing something in a very great rush. You're doing it very quickly, and maybe in a slight lack of preparation is going in to what you're trying to do. If you wake up late in the morning because you overslept, you might have to scramble to get out of the door on time so that you're not late for work. Maybe you forgot it's your partner's birthday or something. Oh no, my wife or my husband, it's their birthday tomorrow. I haven't bought them anything or planned any events. I've been so busy, I have to scramble to figure something out. I have to go out and get them a gift and try to find a restaurant with a free table so I can take them out for dinner, but you're doing all of this with very little time and without the normal resources that you might want to have to do this activity or to be successful. So, often in this way, the storm is coming close. We know a week before that it should be heading towards our general area, but where it will actually hit is often known only maybe a day or two before, so they have to make big decisions with very little time to prepare. That's why they're scrambling whether to call a typhoon holiday or, of course, to not call the holiday and have everyone go out to work in possibly quite bad weather. So in recent years, it says some critics have argued that this system is abused by politicians, hoping to curry favor with voters. So I guess in the past, it wasn't such an issue. I'm not sure why. Maybe people didn't make it an issue. Or in the past, of course, before Taiwan was a democracy, you wouldn't accuse politicians of doing this because they would just do what they want. They wouldn't be doing things to try to make people happy and make people vote for them. But some critics have argued that the system is being abused, aren't they, Roger?
They certainly are, and I suppose most people would be happy that they had a typhoon day because they could stay at home. Oh, because of that typhoon day, I'm going to vote for that candidate in the next election. Or if you're running a business and the politician calls a day off and you lose money as a result, you're probably going to vote for the other candidate. Some people are criticizing these actions as abusing the trust of the voters, okay? So abuse here just means to use someone for your own benefit or to treat someone cruelly. And they're abusing the system. They're using it for their own benefit. They want to curry favor with voters. Okay, here we've got the term curry favor. Curry here in this particular case does not have to do with the Indian dish curry. They're very tasty. But here to curry favor with somebody just means to sort of brown nose them. You're kind of pai ma pi, as you say in Chinese.
Yeah, you're trying to make them like you by doing something that is good for them. And of course, you're hoping that that will reflect on you and create good feelings. I think generally they know that more people like the holidays than dislike them. More people are workers than bosses. So they kind of feel maybe that the more holidays that they have, that generally most people will be more happy about that. But critics have argued that they are abusing this system. Critics are people who point out the problems and the flaws and the mistakes and what is going wrong. You could have a movie critic who sees the movie and tells you the good things and the bad things about it so that you can decide whether to spend your money and time on seeing it. Restaurant critics, very similar. And political critics, often they're for the other side. They might be a politician or they might just be a friendly journalist, and they're always pointing out that the things that the DPP is doing wrong and how the KMT would do it better. And then critics on the other side would be saying, oh, but the KMT, they made all these mistakes, and the DPP, they're doing all these good things. So they're sort of sitting on the sidelines giving their opinions and pointing out the things and the mistakes that they believe that politicians are making. So they think some people, and I guess today we would be looking more at critics of the DPP government just because they've been in power longer. They're calling more typhoon holidays, say these critics of the DPP, because they want want voters to like them. It's kind of like a free gift to the voters, and election time, people will be more likely to vote for those politicians. However, it says many still believe allowing each region to make its own decision provides the best way to protect citizens. If we take politics out of it, just logically, we should allow each county, each region, each town, each city in Taiwan to make the best decision for them based on local conditions, which is a good point. I mean, why would the president sitting in their office in Taipei know the weather situation down in Kending or Erluanbi? Why are they making decisions that affect people who live hundreds of kilometers away? I can see the logic there.
Yeah, but it does happen every time, of course. School is canceled in Taipei, but then they still have school down in Kaohsiung or Taichung or whatever. So, of course, each region makes its own call. They make their own decisions and how they want to protect their citizens. And below, we've got the opinions of 8 people. They offer their opinions on this divisive topic. If something's divisive, it's something that is controversial. People don't have the same opinion on it. And of course, in modern politics, we've got lots of divisive topics out there between the Greens and the Blues here in Taiwan, or the Reds and the Blues in the United States, or whatever. They have lots of divisive topics that they argue about, and hopefully something will get done as a result. So let's find out what Lily has to say, and also Paul, in the second part of our lesson right now.
A. Lily. Though typhoon holidays are meant to be declared for public safety, the decision often involves factors beyond just safety. Therefore, I think we should reconsider whether they're truly necessary.
B. Paul. The politicians can't win. If they call a typhoon holiday when the weather isn't so bad, they're accused of vote buying. But if they don't call one when the weather's rough, they're criticized for prioritizing profits over public safety. Ultimately, though, the voters in their area get to decide if they've acted appropriately. So, the existing system seems reasonable.
第二部分看到动词 declare， 它的意思是宣布、公布、声明。例如 Evan declared his intention to run for school president. Evan 宣布他想要参选学生会长。再看一个例子 The judges declared a winner in the competition. 评审们公布比赛的优胜者。往后介绍动词 accuse， 指的是指责、谴责、指控、控诉。举例来说Mary accused her brother of breaking her favorite toy. Mary 指责她的哥哥弄坏了她最喜欢的玩具。或是 Ryan accused his neighbor of stealing his newspapers. Ryan 指控他的邻居偷走了他的报纸。接下来看到副词 ultimately， 表示最终、最后。可以说 After much consideration, they ultimately decided to move forward with the project. 经过深思熟虑后，他们最终决定这项专案要继续进行。最后一个例子 Calvin ultimately failed to achieve his goal of being elected class president. Calvin 最终未能达成获选为班长的目标。
All right, we are back. So we're listening to different opinions about typhoon holidays and whether politicians are abusing them in order to gain favor, in order to do something nice for voters. What's Lily got to say about this? She's a person who lives here in Taiwan, and this is her opinion. She says, though typhoon holidays are meant to be declared for public safety, the decision often involves factors beyond just safety. Therefore, I think we should reconsider whether they're truly necessary. Okay, so yeah, I guess Lily buys into this idea that politicians are abusing these. They are kind of calling more typhoon holidays in order to get the voters to like them. So they're meant to be declared for public safety, but it often goes beyond just safety into, yes, politicians trying to get people to like them. When you declare something, it basically is kind of an announcement in an official capacity. All right, someone might declare this factory closed because of a strike. It might be one of the union leaders or one of the government workers or one of the managers or something like that. At the end of a wedding ceremony, you might have seen in movies, I now declare you man and wife. That is the priest, the minister, the holy person, the official conducting the ceremony in their role as an official of some kind. They are saying this is true, this is the situation, so it carries kind of legal weight. And it is true, if they declare a typhoon holiday, it's illegal for your boss to force you to work or something like that, right? Because the government has officially declared or officially stated a certain thing is true or a certain thing should happen. So therefore, she says, because of all this, I think we should reconsider whether they're truly necessary. More care and consideration should be taken into deciding whether there is a holiday or not. It shouldn't just be for the politicians to decide.
It sounds to me like she's saying we should not have typhoon holidays at all, sort of, that we should go to school or work when the wind is blowing 100 miles per hour or whatever. It does sort of sound like that, but I don't think that's what she means. Here's Paul's opinion. He says, the politicians can't win. It's a no-win situation for the politicians. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So they can't win. If they call a typhoon holiday when the weather isn't so bad, they're accused of vote buying. But if they don't call one when the weather's rough, they're criticized for prioritizing profits over public safety. So here Paul is kind of siding with politicians. It's very difficult for them to side. On the one hand, if they call a typhoon holiday and the weather turns out not to be so bad, well, they'll be accused of vote buying. Okay, if you're accused of something, people just say that you've done this thing, you've done this bad thing. You'll be accused of a crime, for example. They'll say that you committed it, and then later you have to go to trial or whatever. And they'll be accused of vote buying. I don't think they're actually going out there and paying people to vote for them. They're just trying to curry favor with those voters to get them to vote for them next time. But if they don't call the typhoon and the weather's bad or if it's rough, well, they'll be in big trouble. They'll be criticized for prioritizing profits over public safety. So yeah, you don't want to cancel work because you want those companies to keep on making money, and then those people will vote for you in the next election.
Yeah, there you go. And of course, if they don't call the typhoon holiday, the workers go to work, and God forbid someone should get hurt driving to work that morning, then of course the politician would probably be blamed for that death, and they would be in big trouble. So yes, it's a no-win situation for the politicians. Ultimately, though, he says the voters in their area get to decide if they've acted appropriately, so the existing system seems reasonable. Paul kind of thinks it's okay the way it is. You have to understand the politicians have a tough choice here. They can either call the holiday and get accused of something, or they can not call the holiday and get accused of something else. They can never make everyone happy. But he says ultimately, in the end, at the end of the day, when we look at it all in the big picture, the voters in their area, whether it's voting for your local politician, your local mayor, or the president, or whoever it is, the people get to decide if the politicians, if they've acted appropriately. If the politicians make generally good decisions, then the voters will continue to vote for them, to continue to employ them in their official capacity. So the existing system seems reasonable for him. If the politicians are always getting those calls wrong or clearly doing it in order to make the bosses happy and ignoring public safety, then again, the voters can vote on that, and they will often choose to vote that person out of office based on what they do. So for him, it kind of works, although it's never going to be perfect. Let's find out about Stella in the final opinion of today's article.
C. Stella. By and large, Taiwan does a great job of responding to typhoons. There's really nothing wrong with the current system. And as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay, so here's what Stella has to say. She says, by and large, Taiwan does a great job of responding to typhoons. I would say more or less, by and large, basically overall, etc. Taiwan does a pretty good job of responding to those typhoons, and we can't blame them. Sometimes you just can't predict those typhoons. I think last year there was one. They really thought it was going to destroy Taipei, and they called off school and work, but then it just went the other direction, and it was a peaceful day in Taipei. But how are they supposed to know? Nobody can predict the weather. But she says basically, by and large, the government does a good job of predicting or responding to typhoons.
Yeah, so she's pretty happy too. There's really nothing wrong with the current system, she says. So this is kind of like Paul, from not the political side of it, but just more of the practical, realistic side of it. They can't see everything, as Roger explains. They can't predict the weather. And they do pretty well with what they have. And she says, and as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a classic old saying, kind of saying it may not be perfect, but if it does the job, then that's fine. Don't mess around with something that does the job, even if it's not 100% perfect. If it's doing it at 85 or 90%, especially if it's been doing it like that for a good while, then just leave it alone. And of course, there's another famous expression in English. This is very similar. Actually, I think it might come from French. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In other words, don't go after something and try to make it perfect, but destroy something that was pretty good already. In other words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I think we all have that experience. We wanted to make something better, and we ended up making it worse. So that's where we can use this phrase. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it more or less works, don't risk making it even worse than it is. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes Hanny. She ain't broke, so we don't need to fix her.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分提到，一些批评者认为地方政府决定是否宣布台风假的这项制度被希望讨好选民的政治人物滥用了。好，文中他用到 curry favor with voters 来表达讨好选民，这是一个有趣的用法。curry favor 表示拍马屁讨好，尤其是指对当权者的讨好奉承拍马屁。那么后面可以接 with somebody 来表达讨好某人。那这边也顺便补充几个跟 favor 相关的用法。favor 当名词呢，它可以指帮助或是恩惠。Do somebody a favor 或者是 do a favor for somebody 可以表示帮某人一个忙，这时候就跟 give somebody a hand 意思差不多。那如果是 owe somebody a favor 表示欠某人一次人情， Return the favor 则是还人情。好，那另外 favor 当名词，它还有支持、赞同、偏爱的意思。我们可以用 in favor of 加上名词或动名词去表达支持、赞成什么什么，或是表达宁愿选择什么、想要什么而不要什么什么的那种语义。举例来说 ，Not everyone is in favor of a new policy。不是每个人都支持那项新政策。再造一个例句是 He turned down the job offer in favor of returning to his hometown. 他谢绝了那个工作机会而选择返回家乡。好，那再补充一个用语是 fall out of favor， 则是表达不再受到喜爱、失宠了。像我们可以说 The chat app has fallen out of favor. 那个聊天应用程式已经失宠了，不受欢迎了。我们看到课文第三部分 Stella 认为整体来说台湾在应对台风方面做得很好，目前的制度并没有什么大问题。那接着他就说 As the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. 正如俗话说的，东西没坏就不要去修它。好，那这个谚语 If it ain't broke, don't fix it， 它是指说东西没坏就别修了。那引申的意思是不要没必要的去改变现状。好，那其中这个 ain't 是 is not 的口语形式。至于它前面有用到 as 点点点 goes 是表达正如什么所说据说，其中的 as 是当连接词去表达正如点点点的意思， go 是用来带出要引述的内容。那像我们就可以用 as the story goes 来表达如故事所言据说，或是 as the saying goes 来表达俗话说常言道等等的意思。例如 as the saying goes, nothing ventured, nothing gained。 俗话说不入虎穴焉得虎子，也就是说没有冒险就没有收获，用来鼓励人要勇于尝试，勇于冒险。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Annually. As a major tourist draw, the museum attracts more than 1 million visitors annually. Scramble. Outside City Hall, reporters scramble to ask the mayor questions about the proposed law. Critic. Critics say that the government's new policy will harm small businesses. Abuse. Gail thinks that Danielle has abused the trust given to her by the team. Declare. A state of emergency was declared in response to the powerful earthquake. Accuse. Trey was accused of cheating on the exam, but he insisted that he was innocent. Ultimately. After considering it carefully, Molly ultimately decided to accept the job offer.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.